Words and context questions tend to be some of the hardest for my SAT students, especially the ones that are international students. But these questions are extremely important for you to overcome. First of all, they're the first 4 to 6 questions in each module, so they're the first thing you encounter. For many of my students, we suggest that they skip these questions and do them later so that they're not kind of burdened by the worry that they screwed up their test when they first started, and instead focus on some of the questions that are easier and a little more straightforward. The questions are really important because they can make up to 14% of your reading writing score. And so, if you struggle with these, you need to do some work into understanding them. This video is going to help you with some of the strategy that you should take when you're approaching these questions. These questions are testing you on a number of skills, not just vocabulary. They're testing you on reading comprehension, vocabulary breadth, that means how many words do you know in total, vocabulary depth, which is do you know a lot of synonyms and do you understand the register difference between words, tone, positive, neutral, or negative tones, and how that influences meaning, fluency, a lot of that has to do with idiomatic complements and verb phrases, and logic. Did you follow the logic of the sentences and understand that when we had a transition that we switched from needing a positive word to maybe needing a negative word? So typically, when students approach the words and context questions, what they read looks something like this. They only read the beginning or right up until the blank shows up, and then they try and answer the questions using a shortcut. The problem is the test writers know about those shortcuts, and they design these questions sometimes in ways to confound you. So, first of all, don't do that. Read the entire passage. Another thing that students do is they focus on what they already know to be true. So if the passage is dealing with something factual, they will rely on their knowledge to kind of guess at what answer should go there. Again, that's a bad strategy because the test writers know that you're going to do that. A strategy that's not terrible but can lead you astray is to plug words into the sentence. You can plug words in the sentence, and you should, but not right away. You should understand the passage first and anticipate what you're looking for before plugging words in. And last but not least, and this is really the big pitfall I find for students, is they go, well, it makes sense. It makes sense when I put that word in there. It can make sense. The problem is your brain is always trying to make sense of things. And if you give it a word, it will work really hard to kind of go, oh, yeah, I understand that. That makes sense to us. The problem is it's not the best word. And your assignment on the SAT is always to find the word that best finishes the passage, not just a word that makes sense. So instead, what we want to do is we want to follow these strategies. First, read the whole passage. Understand what the passage is saying before you anticipate what should go in that blank. So if we look at the passage, it says, some researchers have suggested that insects in the upper canopy of the Amazon jungle are not a very blank group. But research professor Jack C. Schultz posits that gall-producing insects leverage the tree's immune and reproductive systems to create a habitat and food source. While insects like ants and bees are typically known to alter the environment to increase their viability, other insects were believed to merely inhabit the environment, exerting no changes on it. So, if we look at my notes here, and you should take notes, especially if you struggle with this, you should give yourself um, a little note just to kind of clarify in your mind, what are we talking about? So my notes are, this is a they say, I say passage. A they say, I say passage starts with what we used to believe or what one group believes and then shifts to what we now know or what a different group believes. And what this is stating is gall insects, whatever they are, I know what they are, but you might not know. But it doesn't really matter. What it matters is a specific type of insect. Use trees to make home and food, like bees and ants. And this is new knowledge. That's enough for me to understand kind of what the overview of the passage is and to figure out where we're going. So next what we're going to do is we're going to look for clues, and the clues will frequently come after the blank, sometimes at the very end of the passage. Again, that is a strategy the test writers use to kind of say, hey, this is the absolute right answer. But if you just kind of guessing for yourself what the answer should be, that's where they're going to catch you. So our clues here are to create and alter, and actually there's another one in here, exerting no changes. All of those have this idea of changing, altering, adjusting the environment to suit the insect's needs. So now I know that that's probably the idea that I'm looking for. So I'm going to anticipate the answer. So one thing I want to always pay attention to is my transition words. Transition words can alter what type of word I need, whether I need a positive word that's in line with what the other words are saying or a negative word that's in opposition to it. Here we have a very typical transition pattern. We have a not plus the blank plus the but, which tells me that what goes in the blank has to be similar to what comes after the but. So because of that, I know that I need a word that's similar to create, alter, no changes, which means to fix, to improve, to make, right? And so they're saying that they thought that the insects were not a creative bunch, a productive bunch, a changing bunch, but instead they are. So now I want to match. This is where we match. Once we've already figured out what the word is that we want, now we're going to try and match. So here we have engineering. You might have been tempted just to throw away engineering right away because it doesn't match with what you think engineering is. Be really careful about that. Frequently, the College Board will be using words in old-fashioned definitions or less familiar definitions than you're used to. So instead of doing that, remember that you want to widen yourself out to what is this word? What could this word mean? Does it match with what we anticipated? And if it's possible, we're going to hold on to it until we've gotten rid of everything else. So our other choices are predatory. Predatory is off topic, and there's nothing else in the passage that talks about insects eating other insects or other animals or acting as predators. And if there's no other information in the passage about it, even if it could be true, even if it could make sense, it's not the right answer. Diverse, again, there's nothing in the passage that's talking about diversity or about variety. And so that's not our answer. And passive is actually the opposite of being creative or productive. So, of course, that's not the right answer. But it is a trap answer if you're not paying attention to those transitions. So now, again, we're just left with engineering. So it's the best answer. When we look at the questions and what the questions are often asking you, they're always saying what's the best answer, not what's the perfect answer or what's the answer you think it should be. What's the best of the four? And so engineering in this case was the best of the four. Now, the next question that students always ask is, what if I don't know the words? And not knowing the vocabulary is a problem. If you don't know vocabulary, you need to spend some time improving your vocabulary. Where you can find information about that is first practice tests that you've already completed. Go through and find every word that you don't know. Learn those words. Then try the academic word list. So the AWL or academic word list was produced by a university where they reviewed thousands and thousands of academic papers and found the vocabulary that shows up most frequently in those papers. That is not like common words like the and an. Then Greek and Latin roots. Greek and Latin roots can really leverage your vocabulary. You don't have to learn all the words, but once you know those roots, you can make good guesses about what words you're unfamiliar with might mean. Roots to Words is a really good resource, and it's free for you to use. And if you want a book instead, try Robert's Extremely Nerdy Guide to SAT Vocabulary. It was designed for this new test. Okay, so try your best and follow the plan.